I'm Kathryn Flashner, and this is The Truth Is, a podcast about discovering what it means to live your truth. Even when it's messy, when it unravels the plans you thought you had and invites you to step into the unknown. Each week, we explore practices, stories, and conversations that illuminate the ways we find and follow our own path. This is a space to slow down, ask questions, and uncover what's been quietly waiting inside of you. If it resonates, subscribing, following, and engaging with the show really supports me in bringing more people into the conversation. Thank you for being here. Welcome to The Truth Is. Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Truth Is. I'm your host, Kathryn, and great to be meeting you here. This is what I'll call like a midsummer little check-in. I want to put a little bit of a bow on season 2. I don't want to be too period, that's over, because to me, the thread of this show, we're pulling forward to a season 3, but it's like more of a ... if you will. I want to take today to briefly share a little bit about who I am. I'm so energized by the new folks starting to listen to the show as I've been building it over almost the last year. I relaunched it last September with the season 2 after it was like a COVID creative outlet during the global pandemic in 2022. It's been so affirming and energizing and informative to hear from some of you that are discovering the show, what's resonating, why it's resonating, where you want it to go next. It's very affirming to me because, people ask me all the time what the show's about, and I feel the definition of it and my answer to that question constantly evolving. So I'll speak a little bit about that today, but I've always envisioned it as this collective inquiry. I am not going to be someone on the internet that claims to have answers for you. I am a believer in asking the questions and having the conversations and letting my curiosity and our collective curiosity shape what this becomes. Today, my core intention is to share a little bit about the process and what I've learned in season 2, allow it to be at ... for the season 3 that I'm building now, and to also just simply share who I am for those that are new to the show. It's a really cool moment of growth for it, where I went from friends of friends to strangers now that have met me through the show. I'm getting to meet you guys and hear how it's landing for you and how it is circling questions that I think a lot of us have individually and collectively that really came from where I was in my life over the last few years, stepping into creating this. So welcome. It's good to be with you. I'm going to what's professionalism in podcasting, but I want to show you where I am if you're watching it. I'm going to turn the camera around. Can you see that? I hope you can. It's unbelievable what my view is right now. It looks like a painting, and this is rare. My life is not like this, but it is right now. I am sitting in the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina. I've been here twice before. I connected with the wonderful individual that owns this property that's made it, and I've just been really fortunate to find myself here, building, taking a week to really envision and sit in where this show and this work is going to go next. And it's been interesting. As a brief aside, which if you're just getting to know me, I'll say simply, part of my story is that I built a career in the corporate world over the last decade. I went to business school when I was 23. I think it's important context for the truth is that I remember being at this fork in the road where I was either going to pursue drama school or accept this offer to go to business school. And I went to business school, and it's relevant for the types of conversations I have on the show that I knew in the back of my head, okay, you're going to pursue this path, and somewhere down the line, probably in your 30s, you're going to have to reconcile what you kind of left to the side. And that has totally come to fruition, which has been really interesting. But for the sake of today, what I want to say about my corporate experience, because man, so much of this show, the questions I'm exploring are like, how do we veer off the path that we, had carved out and kind of got really familiar with and knew what success meant in a certain world, to pursue something totally different, to follow a thread within us that's like tugging us somewhere else. But as part of that, it's been interesting to observe myself in this week where I've been to so many strategy offsites, like annual planning weeks or days over the last decade. And some leaders have been really innovative with like, we're going to go off site and do something totally different and get like the blood flowing in a different way. But I've also been in many that are like in a conference room under fluorescent lighting, eating a catered lunch, kind of like multitasking behind laptops while people present. And it's been interesting to watch myself this week because I've been in this work for the last year. And now I'm hitting a period of growth where, all right, I want to lay out some loose plans. The word loose is part of the lesson, but I want to share something up front that I'm really learning and observing about myself, because what I'm coming in to learn in my conversations with you guys that are listening to the show is, how do we come to understand how to work and lead our lives less from a standpoint of hustling and not enough, more from a place of groundedness, intuition. And as I've observed myself throughout this week, I came into this week like, oh my gosh, I'm in a beautiful place. There was a part of me that's like, you're going to get so much done. And I had really high expectations for how much output would come from this week. And what I find is that being an entrepreneur, working for myself for the first time, it's like you hear all those lessons that people learn and they try to pass to you. And then you're like, yeah, I got it though. And then it's just so humbling to learn them for yourself. And I do believe like advice is helpful. Hearing from others' experiences is like the point of the show. And it's empowering to just learn things for yourself. It's like lived experience, lived wisdom. So I've been watching myself this week, and there's a part of me that comes online that's like, I wake up every morning and I'm like, all right, you got to dive right in. There's so much you want to get done. You want to map out all the guests. You want to reach out to potential partners, all this stuff, right? But when that part of me leads, and I think that part of me was so conditioned to overcompensate, stay up all night, prove my worth by constantly doing. When that part of me is leading a day in this week, in this chapter of my life, I find that I get so busy because I'm anxious about not moving forward. But rarely does something substantial come from that way of working and being. To paint the opposite of that, this morning's a beautiful example. And I'm obviously finally recording the solo episode that I'd been kicking down the road all week because I was manically doing other things. I got up and I like was present to my environment. I walked in the woods with my dog, even for 20 minutes without my phone. I was able to like regulate with my body and just like tune into the present moment that I'm in right now. And what's interesting about that state, which I think I used to label as lazy, inactive, the opposite of the way of being that's going to move me in my work and my life forward. When I'm in that state, the like next step, the next thing to do becomes so clear. And not only is it clear, but I have the capacity to go do it. I feel like this is part of like a new paradigm that we're uncovering together here. But it's so interesting to sit in this lesson of all of my fear or anxiety wants me to just stay busy and keep doing and push through. And if I don't do that, I'm doomed and this won't work out. But then when I get in a state where it just feels more grounded, more in tune with what's here right now, the next step on the path becomes clear. And so I wanted to offer that one little snapshot, like from my life right now, a lesson I'm learning right now that feels like the tip of the iceberg that we're uncovering together. And I'll speak simply about like the inception of this show and what it is all about. People ask me all the time, so what is your podcast? And at first I found myself getting shy about the simplicity of, well, it's an exploration of what it means to live true to who we are, why we don't do that, what happens when we do. And for me personally, I think part of that was born out of that duality I mentioned in my early 20s, like the part of me that just wanted to be around theater and creativity. But then there was a part of me that wanted to pursue what it meant to be in a big brand and a big organization. I felt like I put the creative part of me aside. And now I'm figuring out how to reintegrate it. For a long time, there was so much compartmentalization, right? It's like, this is who I am at work. Then I get to go do these hobbies. This is who I am at home. So I got really curious about like, well, what is the true self? What does it mean to live true to who I am and to have all of this exist? And a real inflection point was I was asked to do a presentation at my alma mater, my business school, during COVID on wellness. And I was like, well, what do I want to say about wellness in the context of the business world? And I started to do all this research, and the statistic I came across that fascinated me and daunted me was like, at the time, it was something like 45%. I've done newer research now, some that indicates it's even higher, of workers or employees suppress meaningful aspects of who they are in order to be successful. And so I think it calls into question, well, like success on whose terms? And what would happen if we started to question that? And so the premise of the show was, what does it mean to live true to who we are? And that started as a pandemic creative outlet with my friends on my sofa in San Francisco. And then I moved to Los Angeles like 3.5 years ago to take a job at a female-led media company. And I learned so much over those 3.5 years. It had me start to think about like, oh, I see how this business model works. What would it mean to do it on my own? And so I dove back into it over the last 1.5 years. And is my life experience caught up with me? Is the world has moved into like a moment where everything feels incredibly disruptive, dysregulated. There's so much uncertainty. As I came back to the show last summer, I was like, this was so mirrored the state that I was in. I was like, well, maybe this show is for people in their 30s and 40s having an existential crisis. And that was really true for me. I hit like major burnout in my career. I was a vice president at a company I would have dreamed of working at. And I was like living on autopilot. And I went through a really like, I guess the most accurate world is like painful and disorienting breakup in my personal life. And that had me look at like who I was trying to be in that part of my life and in how much I was like performing that I was enjoying it versus maybe listening more closely to what I actually needed and wanted. It was like really trying to keep everything together for the sake of, I don't know how it looked or not being alone. And then going through that like life rupture, if you will. I started to really question who I was striving to be professionally and what I was striving to do. And I think we all have these moments of rupture in life, whether it's a big, unexpected, destabilizing event like loss, any form of loss, of identity shift. And it feels like we're living through one collectively, like a real identity rupture collectively. And so I got really curious about how people move through those life moments, those like portals of transition, of understanding themselves more deeply. And then I set out on season 2, where I probably did roughly 30 to 35 episodes and interviews. And what was really cool for me is at first I was really drawn to mentors and peers and friends in my life that had made these huge identity changes. Lawyer turned writer, um, entrepreneur in his early 50s. My sister, who was corporate healthcare consultant that put herself through culinary school and is now pursuing a culinary career full time in a kitchen in an incredible restaurant in Philadelphia. And those conversations naturally led me to folks that are like looking at the collective truth of what we're living through right now. I interviewed my dear friend who's an expert on misinformation and social media and how in public opinion. And she talked to us about how we like reclaim our attention and our ability to even discern what feels true for us in a world that feels like it's like algorithmically trying to just capture our attention and tell us what's true. And so the energy of the show started to feel like this like reclamation of like, no, we want to decide what's true and how we want to live moving forward individually and collectively. And so then this show started to give me a belief that, oh, this idea of personal liberation and excavation is so tied to our collective. And I started to see this pattern through the stories of the individuals I would interview that went something like, when I listen for and live into what feels true to me, it's actually alchemized or created or manifested as my greatest service to those around me. And so I started to get hell bent on this idea of living towards a goal of self actualization over self optimization. I don't need to get into the self optimization of it all. I think we all, at least I know what that looks like on my like feeds. And I think it contributes to that part of me that's like never enough and manically needing to do more, more, more. And so this show like nurtured a curiosity around, well, what is this alternative path where we're not sticking to climbing a ladder like a blueprint that was handed to us, but like maybe we balance that with our own internal calibration and definition of success, like intrinsic success, where like all of our experiences, every version of us helps us uncover who we really are. This like true self and true path. And so I'll simply say, yes, I still believe in like the existential crisis in whatever decade you're in. I think it's lifelong. That's what this show is for. And it is also for what we do after. what we do because of the rupture, because of the crisis, because of the aha, like, oh, I actually can't do this anymore like this. This is not me anymore. I'm really curious about what we create and what we discover from that place. My hope is that this show simply opens up your aperture for what you believe is possible for your life. Every conversation I've been fortunate to have on this show or around this show has reaffirmed me and opened up my horizon in ways I couldn't have predicted. And so I've come to believe in curiosity over certainty, not knowing over knowing. And that while it feels like this is so much about an individual path, it has so reminded me that nothing happens alone. Like I think that's why, despite how saturated and overwhelming all the podcasting is, I'm such a believer that we're like one conversation away from a shift in perspective, a shift in where we're headed. Sitting on this in this beautiful property over the last few days, I got to know the owner, and he shared with me his story of discovering this land. And when he went through his own life rupture, like sitting on it in meditation for days and days and days. And I would have assumed that he just found this beautiful forest like as it was. But then he pulled out his phone and showed me pictures. And it was like the land was so dried and not nurtured, and like there was so much debris that had to be cleared. And we were standing on it yesterday, and I just had this aha of like, oh my gosh, like he his healing was so connected to pouring back into this place, pouring back into the natural world. And the reciprocity of that was not only between him and this beautiful place, but now like I get to experience it, and it gets to be a part of my story. So I'm just so moved by the interconnectedness and the interdependence of us all walking our own true path, but that being such fuel and source of inspiration for those around you, for those around us. And the thing that fuels me about continuing to build this is that our world is so ripe for a new way. And the cool thing about whatever decade you're in, 30s, 40s, 70s, 20s, we create it. We create it. The testament of being at this beautiful space that like now has a little bear run across the street. Oh my gosh, bunnies, baby deer. People can come and like have like such a healing retreat. In the fact that it was like such a like neglected and damaged piece of land. It's like we create our collective experience. We create our individual experience. So it's ironic that I worked in brand strategy for a decade, and it's really hard for me to encapsulate this show into like a jazzy sentence that I can market it with. But I think there's something enticing about that, especially if you sat with me for the last 20 or so minutes. But what I want is to invite us all to close the gap between who we think we need to be and who we really are. Because I think that's what the world needs from us, is for us to be who we really are in our truth. So those are the stories that I'm seeking in season 3. I see this as a collective conversation. And not only will it exist digitally, but my dream has always been to have people in inquiry and community, creating spaces for truth to be discovered together. And so if you're on the East Coast, I will be having a retreat with my former guest, collaborator, Sarah Spoto of Body. in upstate New York in October, but more to come. I ask all my guests at the end of the show a few rapid fire questions, and one of them that I love hearing the answers to is, what is a ritual or a practice that keeps you you? And man, one of my answers is, the closer in proximity and the more entrenched I can get in the natural world, the more me I feel. And like I shared earlier in this episode, it so has to do with a reminder of like the natural and sustainable pace of things. It's not hyperbolic to say I feel like the world technologically we're living in right now, it truly is like designed to, or a byproduct of the design is like our brains are glitching out. At least that's how I feel. And the wild dichotomy is that like I could like try to mine for an answer within me by like going on an AI chat box and like spinning for hours, or I could like go take a walk in the woods. And so just consider your answer to that question. What is a ritual or a practice or a place that keeps you you? And maybe take some time for it this week. I look forward to seeing you and connecting with you. And I thank you for being a part of this show, because for me, it is so rooted in our collective curiosity and the questions that we all sit with alone that we get to live together out loud. Okay. Until next time, I'm going to go be in the trees, and I will see you soon. Thanks for being here. I hope you leave this episode with something that stays with you, a question worth holding, or an insight worth following. If this conversation resonated, subscribing or sharing the episode helps bring more people into the conversation. And connect with The Truth Is at The Truth Is Podcast on Instagram. Special thanks to the people who make this show possible. Editing by Dan Kroll. Video production and editing by Anton LaPlume. Music by Will Savino. Visual identity by Sarah Gaynor and Jonathan Bush. And guidance from my friend and advisor, Natalie Tulloch. I'm Kathryn Flashner. Thank you for listening to The Truth Is.